Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. And we thank all of you for your great work. I want to begin by first thanking FEMA for your great work in helping us up in Massachusetts after our 111 inches of snow last winter. FEMA was just great, and I want to put that on the record. We had 111 inches of snow last year, and Anchorage, Alaska had 20. They had to actually truck in snow to begin the Iditarod race. They had to do the same thing again this year, so clearly the weather is changing, and FEMA has to adapt to it, and we thank you so much for that. And to the SBA, thank you so much. You were there after the tragic Boston Marathon bombings and when tornadoes swept through the cities of Revere and Springfield. The SBA made federal disaster loans available to those communities. And we in Massachusetts, we say, there but for the grace of God goes us. If Hurricane Sandy had just been another degree off and had just hit us, we'd still be in recovery. So may I ask this, as FEMA and the SBA looks at this changing climate and the impact that it can have, especially on small businesses, I look at a restaurant had ads down on the South Shore of Massachusetts that 10 years ago was told that they were too close to the ocean, so they had to move it actually up onto the side of a hill. And then the new maps came out 2 years ago, and they were told that that's now no longer acceptable, that they have to go even higher if they want to be able to, in the long run, be able to qualify for low-cost insurance. So can you talk a little bit about that issue, and especially how it impacts the SBA and what planning FEMA has in place in order to deal with that issue of the ever-rising tides related to the warming of the oceans and the intensification of the storms? We have off in New England, our oceans are warming faster than just about any other place in the world right now. So could you deal with that, Ms. Zimmerman or Mr. Kramer?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. As a part of what we do, I would say that our first response, our first priority in providing a response to disaster survivors is to allow them to rebuild and get back to a life as normal as it could have been before the disaster. In doing that, we do make sure in the disbursement process that people who are going through a moment of crisis have been thoughtful and prudent about what they plan to do as far as the disaster recovery goes, and so that they are going to be doing sufficient repairs to make sure that they have a sustainable structure and home once they're done building, and adding in the RISE Act the ability for them to put a safe room into that dwelling is one advance in that direction, trying to have that sort of advanced thought. I know that we continually look in the demands that we put on folks to do prudent rebuilding. We are looking all the time at these same sorts of issues of what is responsible ways to rebuild and what standards we're
looking out
going to
in the
put on
years ahead,
people.
do you think that the SBA's budget and FEMA's budget will actually have to be increased in order to deal with the ever increasing, power of these storms to damage small businesses? Ms. Zimmerman.
So from FEMA's side, we rely on SBA because we don't have the authority to provide assistance to small businesses. But yes, definitely looking at the extreme weather that we have seen and that we know we're going to see more of, and the changing climate and everything else. So really what we've been focused on is taking a look at not necessarily in most of our programs were rebuild to what had been in the past, but really taking that emphasis look on what could happen in the future and how can the rebuilding and the recovery that we have a part of make that be so it is insurable going forward, and so that we are looking to what could happen in the future instead of always looking backwards as our programs have previously.
Do you think that Congress should amend the Stafford Act to allow for adaptive rebuilding for communities after natural disasters like Hurricane Sandy?
So, I mean, we're constantly looking at our programs and what it is we can do under the wide range and the ability with the Stafford Act, and how we can best support that to be building and rebuilding for the future.
And do you have specific recommendations as to how the agency can improve its response to a similar disaster like we had last winter in Massachusetts?
So for us, working hand in hand with the state is very important for us to make sure that we are there in support of them, as we have been trying to lean forward when it comes to disaster response. So as we see things happening, when we do have a notice for them, to make sure that we have, whether it's our commodities out there, our folks working side by side in the Emergency Operations Center there, just to be able to be there and to get that knowledge and to be able to make sure that the resources flow shortly thereafter. When you do have 111 inches of snow, you got to make sure people are safe, and those actions that those local communities can take so that residents aren't in harm's way.
And does the SBA have any plans for helping to adapt to this climate change which is taking place? Is that part of your thinking at all at this point?
When you look at our role in the disaster response, it is generally working on an individual basis with disaster survivors, be them business owners or homeowners, and doing that sort of one-on-one relationship. Generally, the sort of larger community-wide planning and working with community institutions to take those sorts of steps are things that are handled by, our colleagues at FEMA and other federal agencies. So to the extent that we can do that in making sure that businesses and individuals are being responsible in the way that they rebuild, that's the way it usually manifests in our program.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you.